We acknowledge that Mount Allison University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This land is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship signed centuries ago. We recognize that many of our alumni, students, faculty, and podcast guests live in communities beyond the Mi'kma'ki, across Turtle Island and around the world. As we engage in conversation, reflection, and learning through this podcast, we invite all listeners to reflect on the lands they call home and the Indigenous peoples who have cared for them since time immemorial. As treaty people, we share a responsibility to engage respectfully with this land and with each other, to listen, to learn, and to honor the truths and histories that shape our shared future. Hello, everyone. It's Carolle de Ste-Croix here, and as the Director of Alumni Engagement at Mount Allison, there is someone that I have known not only during my time here, but also as a student. I think that almost everyone who has attended Mount Allison in the past 40, 45 odd years will know our next guest. Today we're joined, when ducks leave the pond, by a world-renowned photographer, a master printer, recipient of the Governor General's Award for Artistic Achievement, a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, and the former head of Fine Arts at Mount Allison. And I don't really need to introduce him because everyone knows by now that I'm talking with Thaddeus Holownia. Hi, Thaddeus.
Well, hello. Thank you for that introduction.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, great, me too.
The premise of this podcast is to really talk about, in the past 19 years, all of the incredible conversations I've had with Allisonians all over the world. And for me, the conversations I've had with you over these past many years have always left me kind of wanting more, trying to figure it all out. This is my first question for you. I think everyone wants to know the answer to this question. Do you remember the first photo you ever took?
I do. The first photo, no, but the first meaningful image that set me on a course of, I guess, what I would consider my true artistic direction was made in 1975 in the fall on Riverdale Avenue in Toronto, and it was a group of 5 artists that I lined up on a lawn, and I was photographing with a new to me borrowed 8 by 20 inch format view camera, and that used, for those of you who aren't up on view camera stuff, 8 by 20 inch negative, and that negative was made of paper, not film, because I couldn't afford film, and nor was there probably any available at that time. And the exposure was 15 seconds, and I developed it in the basement of that house that was the home of a couple artists, in a set tub using a 7.5 watt red light bulb as a safe light, and it was the beginning of my view camera career.
I wish this podcast was on camera, because then everyone could see your eyes twinkling and the smile on your face when you're describing that moment.
Right.
It obviously...
Well, it was one of a few things that changed my life, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Now, there's a couple of questions I want to get into, but let's talk about a bit before Sackville. So, where did you grow up, and where did you train as a photographer?
I came to Canada as a 5-year-old. Polish immigrant parents, landed in Ottawa, moved around a lot. My dad was a civil engineer and moved around to projects. Spent my high school years in Rothsay, New Brunswick, and then moved to go to university at the University of Windsor, where I studied started off in art history, then moved to communication arts because that was the closest thing I could get to photography with. There was no photography in the fine arts department, but I did take printmaking, which I loved. And the most influential professor that I had at the University of Windsor, I know if I should say that.
Well,
there were a few.
But there were a few.
But anyway, I ended up moving to Waterloo and then moved to Toronto, and that's kind of where my true artistic career began. There's a good sidebar to that story. I met someone whose mother worked at the University of Toronto Press. And she said to me one day, you should come and meet Alan Fleming, who works at the University of Toronto Press, arguably one of Canada's most important creative art directors and designers, and show him your portfolio. And so there I went to Alan Fleming with a very naive 35 millimeter portfolio, and he gave me 15 minutes, and I don't remember much about that, but I do remember his parting words were, you should consider using a view camera. I had never even seen a view camera at that point, but
Wow.
the rest kind of unfolded.
The rest is
Yeah.
history, kind of, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And how did you end up from, very urban Toronto back here in New Brunswick?
Another good story. Toronto was, in the late 70s, quite a great artistic milieu, and there weren't a lot of silos, and people were doing all kinds of things in and out of the first artist-run center, which was called A Space Gallery. A Space Gallery had a arrangement with the Owens Art Gallery to promote a emerging artist. And you had to apply, and if you were chosen, then you got a free trip to Sackville and got to have a little show in a little gallery that was in the front of the Owens on the main floor. It's been rearranged now, but so I applied and I got a show. And I came to Sackville in February of 1977. And the exhibition that I had was called Headlighting. It was portraits of people with their cars. It was the first major kind of work that I did with the view camera. I gave a lecture in fine arts, and I left and went back to Toronto. And Virgil Hammack, who was head of the department at the time, called me up and said, we'd really like to offer you a 1-year appointment. If you were interested, come and help organize the photo department, which was, they taught a couple of courses at the time, but it wasn't very, I think the courses had just passed through Senate at that point. At first I said no, and then he called me back and talked me into it. And when I had come, the first time I came by train, and I had come through the Memramcook Valley, and I just remember the flat land and thinking, oh, maybe I could do a photo project here. And so that was the enticement. I just came across a letter that is in my archive, the original typewritten letter from Virgil offering me a 1-year appointment. It's dated April 1977, and my salary for 1 year was $10,000.
Oh, my goodness. Can you imagine? Well, thank you, Virgil Hammack. I mean, that letter...
Yeah.
has led to one of the most recognized photography programs in Eastern Canada. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So you got here for that 1 year. Did you imagine that you would make your life here in Sackville?
Absolutely not. I figured I could work on a project for a year entitled Dykelands, which I did, only it ended up being a much longer project. After the first year, I got a 2-year appointment. I can't remember if that was a going towards a tenure track appointment. I was kind of out of my world. It must have been, because after 2 years, I got a full-time appointment. So here's the big story that is Mount Allison folklore. I was on a field trip with my third year photography class, and it was small. I think there were 4 students. So we were packed into a car, and we were out photographing, and I found a deceased blue jay on the side of the road, and I picked it up. It was in perfect condition, and I came back to campus, and I went to the biology department, and I said, "Is there anybody here studying birds?" And they said, "Yeah, we've just hired someone to teach ornithology." And so they said, "Go up to the second floor in the office, and it's Gay Hansen." So I went upstairs and knocked on the door, and the door opened, and there was this beautiful woman in a lab coat, and I said, I brought you a present, and I gave her a blue jay.
Boy,
That's how we met.
You are Mr. Romance, aren't you?
It's a pretty good story.
It's a pretty great story.
Yeah.
But Gay was the kind of woman who would really love being given a bird.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that is how you met
Yeah.
the love of your life, Gay
Yeah.
Hansen. Yeah. We all miss her so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask more questions about your art and the role
Sure.
that Gay played in kind of your evolution as a visual artist from your time at Mount A.
Yeah.
But first, I want to ask about your students. I remember going to this one event that we had organized in Vancouver for you. There was an opening in one of the galleries. And, I'm used to doing alumni events and people come. But, I mean, your students came out, like I don't even know how they heard about it. But all of a sudden in Vancouver, the place was inundated with fine art students. And yes, they were there to see the art, but they were really there to see you. Can you share with us kind of the role that your students have played in the evolution of your work as a visual artist? And maybe share with us like a project or a group of students that from your years in the classroom that kind of stick out for something they did, something you'll kind of never forget. I think that you've spoken to me about a couple of these things, but let's first talk about the role of students in the creativity process.
Sure. And that's, coming to teaching with no credentials, you work really hard, or at least I worked really hard to try to stay ahead of what I thought was what I was supposed to be doing. Now, I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing, but I worked hard to develop a curriculum that was written out so people could follow it through 4 years of study. I never bullshitted anybody. If they were doing great work, I would tell them, "Man, you're doing great work." If you didn't do great work, you were lazy, I would tell people, "Oh, you know what? You're very lazy." It was harsh for some people, but I've had people who were students come back to me years later and tell me how much they appreciated that. I was always tried to be honest with students, and with students, I think students don't get enough credit for how smart they are, even though they may be a little bit bewildered with the university experience at first. I think it's a tough place to go from high school to university, and so everyone's an individual, and I think it takes a lot of energy to teach a class with that in mind, that you have to be strict but flexible, because everyone learns in different ways. And even though someone may seem to be not learning what you're trying to give as a curriculum, they may be learning it in a different way at a different pace. So I've always worked really hard to kind of stay ahead of the game in terms of what I felt the needs were of students and of the curriculum. I think I retired when I realized that I was not the right person to be doing that, and
Yeah.
moved on.
Yeah. Yeah.
The best thing that I remember doing with students was the exhibition that we put on, which was a collaboration with Environment Canada, 100th anniversary of the Migratory Bird Act. It was called For the Birds. And students had to submit proposals, and I think there were like, I don't remember, 14 or 15 commissions that they did. And then there was an exhibition, and we did a little catalog, and the work went to Washington and to Ottawa. It was a big deal.
It was a big deal. I remember it well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool. Now, one of the kind of things that's really important to you as a teacher, I mean, your students spent much of their time in essentially a photo lab, better known as a darkroom. And of course, now with digital photography, etc., why is that still important? And what did your students come to discover about their photography and themselves through the process of working in a darkroom, which is a photography lab?
Mm. The magic of the photographic process, I don't think, ever ceases to be amazing. So you take a blank piece of paper, shine a light on it, and through a negative, and put it in a tray of chemicals, and all of a sudden you have this image, negative or positive. I never get tired of it to this day. When we were designing the Purdy Crawford Center for the Arts, there was a bit of a talk about eliminating the darkrooms and just going full on digital. Many other programs in the country were doing that. We decided not to do that because the whole physicality of photography, not sitting in front of a computer monitor, being involved in something that is something you can put on the wall immediately after you've made it in the darkroom, seemed very important. And so the digital age of photography probably really blossomed after I retired in 2018. But I look at it as just another tool. If you use a 35 millimeter camera or a view camera or no camera at all, pinhole camera, whatever, or digital camera, it's just a tool, and a tool that you can use to be creative in however you decide to be creative.
And so why is it important for your students to still learn in the darkroom if it's a tool?
Sure. Because limitations create different creative boundaries. And so if you're working with a camera that makes 36 exposures on a roll of film, your brain has to occupy a different space than if you have a digital camera where every exposure that you make has virtually no currency beyond the fact that it's in digital form and you can make 1,000 images and then go back and choose them. That is a creative process, no question about it. Does it allow a mind and a creative being to develop in a way that, I guess I can't think of the right word to describe it, but I think the physicality and the restrictions on a creative act make you more involved in the cerebral part of it. So you're choosing to do something that has a higher currency than just banging off a lot of images and then choosing one. Now, someone will argue that that makes no sense, and that making 1,000 images and then doing what everyone refers to as post-production is a legitimate way, and it probably is for some people. But I think if you're developing a young aesthetic mind, then the physicality of photography through film and slowing down, I think, is much more of a true path to explore.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Society is kind of grappling with the impact of AI, which is, kind of a new technology, a new way of doing
Yeah.
things. I think that, I think writers are now having the same kind of existential discussion in their brains. Like, if this is going to do it all for us, then what does that leave?
Yeah.
So, yeah, very similar. Let's talk a bit about the Tantramar Marsh, right? I mean, when I kind of picture a signature Holownia photo, it's certainly the ones from Dykelands, from the marsh that tend to come to my mind. Now, you set up in Jolicoeur, not far away. Tell us about. I know many of us have visited your beautiful studio that you built out there, and you and Gay raised your children there. It is surrounded, this landscape, different light and the water and the stillness. How does the marsh inspire? How has it inspired your work?
Well, it's hard not to live here and be moved by the landscape if it fits you. And I think that in any creative place, you have to emotionally fit a place before it actually speaks to you or takes on importance. And my first visit to Sackville, I felt a resonance within me, in my heart, that the pace within the Maritimes and the landscape on the Tantramar marshes was attractive to me. It was after I moved here and I started exploring and working more with the landscape that whole thing became a reality. Once Gay and I got together, and Gay had purchased a 13-acre property in Jolicoeur, that we decided we would build a house there. And so then we're living in the middle of that. When you're wearing a lot of hats that are new, having a partner, then having kids, then teaching, you don't go too far afield in relationship to your work. And so my work was very much based in the Maritimes. And so that allowed me a 10-year period to work on the Dykelands book, exhibition, and the other other player in that equation was Douglas Lockheed, who I met early on, and he and I shared friends in Toronto who were in the printing book publishing business, and that was largely through Coach House Press, where I had learned about letterpress printing, and when I had landed here, I started assembling my own letterpress shop.
That's right. Anchorage Press.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. A Holownia photo, most people will recognize it instantly. They can look at it. I was in Eastport, Maine, out of the middle of nowhere, 2017, and I walked into this gallery, and I said to my partner, I said, "Oh my God, look, there's Thaddeus's all over the place here." What? And I wasn't even close to them. I just knew. What do you think gives your photographs that unmistakable fingerprint?
Yeah, I'm flattered that you would say that. I'm not sure that exists, but it does exist for people who are in this region for sure, because the shape of my photographs is kind of unique for the most part, and and the detail and the quality of a contact print. So if I work with a 7x17-inch negative, I'm making a print that uses that negative in contact with the paper, and so the print is 7x17 inches. So I think that has become kind of a recognizable image when it's in a frame that people will link to me. There's lots of other people who work with large format photography had a huge resurrection about 15 years ago. So it's more popular now than any time in my career. It's kind of crazy because when I started working with view cameras, no one was working with view cameras, and you couldn't buy film. You had to make special orders. Now it's easier to get sheet film in any size than ever before in my career.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because I think I heard this story. I don't know if it's true, but apparently when kind of film was on the way out, way back, that you purchased an incredible amount of film. Is this true?
No.
Okay, so good to know. It's good to. It's important to know what is what is true and not true. There's all kinds of many stories.
Yeah.
But tell us about film. Like, so how, as we move into digital more and more, how
Yeah.
are you accessing film?
Yeah.
How different is it?
Well, I'll go back to my first film order, which was in probably the early 80s. No, actually, it was in the late 70s. Shortly after I came here, I ordered Tri-X film from Kodak, and it took about 3 months to place the order before someone would approve it. I had to order 800 sheets, which was the minimum order, and they came in 10-sheet boxes for some unknown reason, even though 25 sheets would easily fit in each box. So it was an investment, and that was the way it was right up until the digital age. View camera photographers had to go and beg for different sizes to Kodak or Ilford Corporation. Now, Ilford has said, okay, all you view camera photographers, all the different formats of film that you use, so from 20 by 24 inch negative size down to 11 by 14, we are going to make film once a year worldwide. You put your order in, you can buy 1 box or 1,000 boxes, we don't care, and you'll have your order in 3 months. So,
Oh, that's kind of cool.
yeah, so it's a brilliant commercial strategy by that company. Oddly enough, Kodak has never adopted that.
Well, they're not doing so well either, right?
Well, apparently, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I think Kodak's main way of making money years ago was chemicals, not film.
Ah, okay.
And so I'm sure they're making money, lots of money on chemicals still, but
More than likely,
yeah.
Now, let's go back to Gay. I know that both of you did some projects together.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about what that was like when you're doing it with your partner, and you're bringing together the biology, the nature, and then, of course, the process.
Well, Gay and I had a kind of symbiotic relationship because we had separate careers at the same place. We shared students over the years, and then we had a family and a home in Jolicoeur that we developed. And there aren't a lot of people, I don't think, who I guess I would consider we homesteaded in Jolicoeur, because when we built the house, it was basically a pasture, and now it is a completely wooded, grown over landscape. Because if you plant things, they grow, and over 40 some years, they grow big. Gay was in many ways my assistant. She brought I've always been interested in nature and the natural world and the environment, and she just counterpointed in so many ways what I was looking at and how I was looking at it. And so even though she may not be as present in some of the landscape work that I have made over the years, whether it was in Sackville or Newfoundland or wherever, she's present in all of those images. The 3 bird books that I referred to that she was involved with and in were the 3 collaborative projects that Harry Thurston and I put together. The first was called Ova Ave, and it was based on the bird egg collection at the now named Gay Henson Ornithology Lab. And that was just hanging out with Gay in the lab and seeing those bird eggs and thinking that they were so extremely beautiful that something should be done to examine those. And Harry wrote some spectacular poems. And Gay wrote a little introduction about how bird eggs get their coloration and why. The second project that became a book was called Icarus Falling of Birds, and that was a much harsher subject matter, and that dealt with the great bird tragedy of 10,000 songbirds being killed by a flaming off of the natural gas plant in St. John, New Brunswick. And Gay was one of the biologists that was set to identify those dead birds, a very unsavory thing that probably the most difficult thing she ever had to do. And then the third bird book was kind of an antidote to Icarus and a celebration of beauty, and I did that book after Gay had passed away, kind of in her honor and in her memory, and it was based on bird study skins that she had prepared or had prepared with students in her lab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful book. I'm happy to.
Of a feather.
Yes, yeah. Of the feather. I'm happy to. I'm quite thrilled that it's in my kind of personal collection at home. Yay. Now, we touched on this a bit, but let's go back. You mentioned Harry Thurston, the written word. You founded the Anchorage Press after you moved to Jolicoeur. What really drew you to create a private press? Why was a private press needed? And what did it give you as an artist that photography alone couldn't do?
Right. Well, Anchorage Press was first proposed as a university press. And so I'm trying to think. I was squatting in the basement of the library at one point, and I had a letterpress shop there, amazingly enough. And I'm trying to remember the president. I think it was Guy McLean. And I was trying to convince him that the carriage house next to the Canadian Studies House should become a residence for visiting writers, and downstairs we would establish a letterpress shop, and we'd call it the Anchorage Press, because that's what the Bennett House, I think, is
that's
called,
correct, yeah.
The Anchorage. Mm-hmm. And well, I didn't get anywhere with that one. So around that same time, Dykelands was published by McGill Queen's University Press, which was great. It was great to have an academic press publish a book of a young upstart professor, because it helped me get a full-time job here probably, or get a promotion or whatever. But it also taught me that giving control, regardless of what level of control they had, was difficult, or could be difficult. So I decided I would continue with the Anchorage Press name and establish my own imprint, which would give me control over all my publishing projects. I really liked collaborating with writers, and so I've collaborated with probably 3 major writers in my career, and those individuals share a spirit of life that is important to me, and the collaborations come from nothing. So there's an idea that I have, and then I approach the writer and I say, is this of any interest to you? And then we proceed without a timeline until it happens to find its ending. And so I've been very fortunate to do that. And the other part of that equation, I think, is that having exhibitions in art galleries and museums is great, but it's very limited. Not a lot of people see exhibitions. It's not, and so I thought of publications and doing books is much more a democratic process. And I give away way more books than I sell.
Oh, I know.
But, I take the income that I make from selling prints, make my books, and the books promote the idea of whatever is within that book and that work in a much broader context than selling prints to people, which I appreciate, but
yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the other things you do in that press, and there's been a lot of publicity about this, our media office, it's funny when we do stories in our office, and you kind of put them out there, and stories you think are just going to fly with the media, and it's just going to be great. We'll get lots of great reputation, and it doesn't happen. And then we put out this cute little story about how all of the diplomas at Mount Allison that are given out at convocation are actually hand-pressed by yourself in Jolicoeur. And so there was pictures and video, and this thing went viral. I mean, not since, we lost the Swans have we seen so many shares on social
Right.
media. What is it about taking a piece of paper, typesetting someone's name in for this diploma, which is in Latin and very uniquely sized? What is it about that process that reflects what Mount Allison is? I was surprised. I mean, I've always known you did this and all of this stuff,
Right.
but the media attention we got over this was really a little surprising to me. I was delighted, but very surprised. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised. First of all, I'll say that the video that was produced was extraordinarily well done. And I have to give kudos to your videographer,
Blaze.
who it's not an easy thing to put something into a 3-minute slot. And it was great because he just took charge of it, and that is part of the equation. I think that what is really important there is when you walk around this campus, there's a certain informality of tradition that is the undercurrent. It's in the buildings, it's in the history. I don't think that you can go on another university campus in this country that has a certain scale and a certain familiarity of smallness in an important way that Mount Allison exists within. If I go on the Acadia University campus, I don't know what the geographical scale is of Acadia, but it seems way, way bigger and not as intimate, whereas Sackville's small. And so I think that the diploma's tradition being upheld in a physical manner has a great appeal to people today. I tell them, quite honestly, yesterday I was in the grocery store. There were two students who were in their 4th year. They were getting their groceries, and I try to talk to everybody, and I just said to them, they had a huge amount of groceries. I said, you're stocking up? And they said, yeah, we just got back. And then one of them turned to me and said, hey, aren't you the guy who makes the diplomas?
Well,
said,
yeah. I mean, it's a big deal.
You know what? It's the most expensive piece of paper anybody's ever going to own.
This is true. And it's the only piece of paper that no one can take away from you. They can take away your job. They can take away your house.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of bad things that can happen.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's almost impossible to take away that piece of paper.
Yeah.
And so it matters. It really does. Wow. How did that even begin? You just kind of volunteered for it? Because one of the things I think most people will remember you, I mean, you're the BFA students, of course, remember you, but you were present on campus, Thaddeus. Like, you walked around a lot. I remember seeing you talk all the time. I think you use your dogs as a way to connect with people also. And you spoke a lot just now about what makes Mount A special and Sackville. But you had, it's not just feeling and seeing these things. You were heavily involved in various aspects of university administration as a head of department and on Senate and those things. You put in a lot of time ensuring that the Mount A you started at is the Mount A we have now. Can you talk a bit about the role that faculty members have in ensuring that those things keep happening? I mean, you've been involved in some very, including the building of the Purdy Crawford Center, which was a massive undertaking.
Yeah. I'm honored to have been part of a lot of things here. A lot of them were not easy. My first 20 years of being a teacher here was not as great as the second 20 years I had. I don't think I won't go into that. That's a whole other story. But, I think you have to be present, you have to be positive, and you have to have a goal. And when I became head of the department, the goal was to find a way of getting a new fine arts building. I was very fortunate that I have a certain social side to me, and I met Purdy Crawford, and I met a few other people along the way who had influence, and we became friends. We became friends, I think, through an honest relationship and me not asking for things, but contributing things. And I think what is a really valuable, important part of moving forward is that people who work in a place should not just work to their job description. And so lots of things happened over the course of my teaching career here, and then my administrative career, which I never really looked to do, but it was timely, and I was able to fit into doing it, I think, well. And so the rewards came from that. But it's not easy, and not everybody fits that. And it's a difficult formula to figure out. If I know probably there isn't a formula, but some of the departments that, personal opinion, some of the departments that were the best departments on this campus when I arrived are now not the best departments, and some of the departments that were struggling are risen to be, and it's cyclical, and it's like the ocean. And
yeah. Well, I let me just ask you this: why should a grade 12 student who is looking to do some type of visual art, fine art, why should they come to Sackville? 3 words.
Well, they should only come to Sackville if they can fit into a small teaching environment. It's not for everybody. But if you want to come to study in a small place where you are recognized as an individual right away, and you have access to the best facility in the country that's safe and open for many, many more hours than a big art school has, you have the opportunity to study in many, many other disciplines. And I think that one of the key things for me in working in this environment was that I could go over to the French department and meet Pete Edwards and get to know him well enough that eventually we would go to Paris and make an incredible project together, or go to geography department and meet a professor who's a dendrologist who we shared students, and then have him bring me back a 1,000-year-old piece of wood from Labrador that would then become a book. Right? These are things that happen because the place is small and the scale allows for individuals to cross paths.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why everyone, doesn't matter what you want to study, should come to Sackville, because it's that ability to interact, not in silos. So, a couple of last questions as we wrap this up, because it's hard to believe it's our time is almost up. You've done so many exhibitions, so many series, so many books. You've worked with so many people. If you could choose one series or exhibition that you think kind of best represents your life's work to date, because I think there's way, way more coming, which one would it be, and why?
I think it would be the exhibition that the Owens sponsored with Karen Stenteford last year or so, of a feather. For many, many personal reasons, but I think it was a summation of the importance of community and the importance of working in a place that gave me so much, and a large part of it was obviously an homage to Gay. But it also brought together a group of people from many constituencies for the opening that was a real reminder of community.
Interesting that you chose that one. So there's a couple of reasons why I think that happened. To be clear, I could not get into the Owens. That's how many people were there. There was a couple things. It was the first kind of post-COVID large gathering with no restrictions that we had had. And people were walking in, and it just felt good. It just felt good. It felt, I remember someone said, this is like the before times. This is like old Mount A. Yeah. People gathering. So I think there was that aspect to it. The community mourning for Gay, I think community was mourning for Gay. So there was this kind of there was almost kind of there were people from every aspect of her life and your life and the students. And so I think that was really powerful. And of course, the work was stunning. It was just stunning, stunning, stunning. So you mentioned the lab that is named after Gay. I know that's been one of your passion projects to make that happen. So thank you for that. Thank you to kind of everyone who helped fund that lab and that endowment in honor of Gay. I think it's just a really important thing to point out in this podcast, that a lot of people kind of responded to the call.
Beyond belief. There are 2 awards now given in Gay's memory, which is really, really special. One is to a third-year student going into third year in recognition of their discovery of something very, very important that will guide them through the rest of their time at Mount A. And that award is chosen by technicians, which is really, really special as well, because it doesn't just recognize marks, or people don't apply for it. People get it. Yeah. Total surprise. And the second award is award in ornithology, and that's for a student who's excelled in the interest of studying ornithology.
Yeah. So, it's a beautiful legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, one last question, a fun one, before we go. Now you said this doesn't happen, but say that you had one last roll of film, no other rolls of film available anywhere. What would you use it for? What would you shoot, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I respond to the environment every single day. I travel with view cameras in my car.
Thaddeus, hold on. How many cameras do you own?
Not that many.
Oh,
I mean,
come
on. I have lots of cameras for different purposes. So I have 35 millimeter camera, which I use not very much. I have an iPhone that I use probably more as a notebook. I have 4 or 5 different view cameras, ranging from negative size 5 by 7 inches, 4 by 10 inches, 7 by 11 inches, 11 by 14 inches, 10 by 12 inches, 7 by 17 inches. So those are all cameras that I use in a variety of ways, and those are my go-to image-making devices. I think I would make a photograph of my environment in Jolicoeur, which I do, as you know, every morning. I give people the weather report from Jolicoeur and put it up on my Facebook. And then I usually also put up an image that has resonance to thinking about what Gay loved and looked at. And those 2 images happen every day, and have happened every day pretty much since she passed away.
Yeah. For those of you who are listening who don't follow Thaddeus on Facebook, if you do have an account, I would go do that. There's a series called For Gay, and then it's an image. and it had taken everyone, kind of stolen our hearts, I guess is the only thing. It's really interesting if you haven't seen them because, as I mentioned earlier, you can recognize a Thaddeus photo anywhere. But the images for Gay, it's literally feels like Gay is taking the picture because they are from her vantage point, where she, when she was basket weaving, what she would see out the window in Jolly Cur, her cat. It really does feel like it is something. There are images that she would have resonated with her in her own life. So I invite everyone to do that. Follow Thaddeus on Facebook, and I think that would be a beautiful photo.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Thaddeus, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks, not just for the diplomas and not just for the conversations, but thank you for loving Mount Allison and loving its students and its people as much as you have and everything you've given to us. It's really resonated with an awful lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been great chatting.
Wonderful.
A sincere thank you to the executive producer and director of our podcast, Kay, who is the quadrant intern at the Alumni Engagement Office. A sincere thank you to them, and especially to the fine folks at CHMA FM Radio who have made all of this possible by allowing us to use their facilities here on campus.
Mount Allison strives to be a safe, respectful, and welcoming place for people of all genders, diverse sexualities, gender identities, and gender expressions through education, programming, support, and advocacy. We prioritized upholding, maintaining, and honoring that environment during the creation of this podcast.